First of all, thank you everybody for being present here. I think it's very inspiring to hear the progress, the good, but also the bad of everybody, because I think we are facing the same struggles in these COVID times. Our project is called Blockchain in the Network Society, but that's a popular title. The subtitle is the same, both in the popular one and in the official one, which is transparency, but also accountability is an important value in our project. Trust and legitimacy by design. By design, when governments, in this case the Dutch government or one of the Dutch governmental bodies, are experimenting or innovating with blockchain when they are exercising public tasks or public authority. Our research team is largely present here. Also Esther Keimolden, with whom I'm leading or heading this project. Also Gert Meyers, our science and technology postdoc, who will take it over after 5 to 7 minutes, as well as Charlotte, our legal PhD. We also have a triple helix consortium, as all of you, of course, because it was a requirement within the NWO call. We have been together already during 2 online valorization panels. And in addition to that, we have also invited several partners such as Ledger Leopard, but also others to brainstorm with each other and to bring our mutual agenda a bit further. We've also launched a website that will automatically appear in the chat right now. So if you want to stroll around the website and see what we've been doing, that's totally up to you to do that. But okay, the content. What is the context in which this project is developing right now? Well, as you know, governments, they usually exercise unilateral public authority. When you are asking, for instance, an urban permit, the government will say yes or no. They will grant you the permit or not. It's not a negotiation, such as a private agreement between 2 private parties. But increasingly, in the past decades, that still predominant way of unilaterally exercising government power has been complemented by network governance. Network governance, where public actors are working together in a governance network with private actors to carry out public tasks and to exercise public authority. So when you add up these two, you get the following picture. You still have unilateral exercise of power. You also have increasingly ever expanding network governance modes, which creates complexity. Technical complexity, because in order to address that complexity, we are using technology, we are using digital technologies, but also hyperconnectivity. We are all connected, in this case, through the WebEx application. And that hyperconnectivity within a network governance context actually leads to digital network governance. Governing in a network, but then digitized, automated. And we think that a prime example of a digital network governance context is the use of blockchain technology to enable 3 types of actions within a network. And basically, they enable, with that distributed database, they enable the registration of facts. They enable the transferring of value, or at least a representation of value through a token. And thirdly, they enable the automatic execution and enforcement of rules. There can be legal rules, but there can also be rules that are agreed upon within the network. Given the time constraints, I'm not going into detail what blockchain is. I hope that everybody at least grasps blockchain as a distributed database where the network, the distributed network, is keeping the network secure and is verifying that transactions in the broad sense, registering data, enforcing rules and transferring value is being accepted by the whole network and then automatically being executed. This context leads us to 2 important research questions. First of all, which value conflicts might arise when public authority is exercised through distributed technologies such as blockchain? And here that might be legal values such as legal certainty, that might be more economic values such as efficiency, but also values such as human dignity, for instance, that might sometimes clash when we use technology in such a hyper complex, hyper connected context. And then secondly, we also want to be a part of the solution, or at least guide how we should be operating as governments within distributed networks. And we are thinking about what are the rule of law conditions, and that's both the big constitutional rule of law principles, such as transparency, accountability, first and foremost. These two are central within our research project, but also the more concrete legal rules and ways of, for instance, making sure that digital literacy, for instance, is also taken into account when we are automating these digital networks. And thirdly, but I would say last but not least, how should these conditions then be designed by design and operationalized in practice? And therefore, the consortium that we've built, but also the use cases that we are looking into are, of course, very valuable to address this question. Methods. What is our methodology? We have, as you saw, a multidisciplinary composition, and we have interdisciplinary ambitions, which we, of course, want to fulfill in the upcoming 3 years. And that also means talking to each other and generating a common language, agreeing what transparency would be, what accountability would be when you're talking between lawyers, but also science and technology studies, and also ICT experts in this case. We also take into account, which is important, the end user perspective, which often is ignored in practice. There are a lot of books and articles about it, and it's so important to look at the end user perspective, but we see in practice that this is not always the case. We also have a multi-level approach. We, for instance, look both at the technological system, we look at the end user, we look at the legal framework. So we are looking from different angles to address these topics and these research questions. Currently, we are in the midst of our qualitative empirical research analysis, where Gert will say a bit more. And he will also talk about our current most important case study, which is the red button of the CJIB, the Judicial Collection Agency. When you're driving too fast on the highway, you get a letter to pay a fine. That's the CJIB. We've done a lot on impact and science communication, because we think that's an important aspect of when you are trying to address important societal issues. So we've produced knowledge clips that are on YouTube. We've been interviewed by the NRC, not the New York Times, regrettably, but they can always also call us. We are giving workshops, etc., and have also been recognized by the KNAW because of our science communication efforts in the past months or year as a team, and that's something I'm very glad with, that we've been recognized in that sense. Our academic output, these are 4 examples, because indeed we are locked down in our chambers at home, but it means that there is a lot of time to write, besides, of course, all these online meetings. We've published a book of 150 pages, which both addresses the technical, the societal, and the legal aspects in Dutch for the Dutch market. Also an international book chapter on the challenges, but also the opportunities of using blockchain and smart contracts, which are simple if A then B algorithms to automatically enforce rules, transfer data, register data or transfer values for democracy in our what we call the distributed algorithmic state. A report which we recently finished 2 weeks ago for Rijkswaterstaat on transparency in the blockchain, where we are looking at the current legal framework, but also developed 10, as you see here, rules of thumb for governments when they are trying to innovate with blockchain, but in order to do that in a meaningful way, where you try to achieve legal compliance, but also guaranteeing transparency and accountability. And an upcoming article in the next months in the Journal of Regulation and Governance with a title that will be explained by Gert, a blockchain solution looking for a problem. So what are the first lessons learned? What after governments are announcing we want to innovate with blockchain? Gert, the floor is yours.
Yeah, the first lessons learned will start with a question that is often disregarded, because science and technology studies, there we often ask what happens before something is finished. Before something is really done, there's a lot of work that happens. But here we see that a lot of things also happen after something is announced. And we see that blockchain applications are often announced as a solution to a well-defined problem. In the magazine Wired in 2018, there was made a list of at least 187 things that the blockchain is supposed to fix. And that is a bit funny that a technology is capable of doing that. At the same time, we should ask ourselves what happens after these announcements. Is the work done then? Of course not. It has to be developed. Yesterday in a project meeting, we were making a rough estimation that in the Netherlands alone, more than 100 use cases have been announced already with blockchain. So, but you seldom see the result of such an announcement. And Evgeny Morozov is a writer, an author, who coined the term of technological solutionism to point at the fact that it is often presented as if social problems can be fixed or be solved with technological applications or solutions. But that is not really doing much good to the problem itself. So we want to look at how the issues that are claimed to be a problem and solved by technology, how these are developed after the announcement. Just a bit about the case we are now, a case study we are conducting. It's about the red button, the rode knop. It was an idea that came out of the CEB Innovation Lab in 2017, and is also presented as the first use case of Bling. And Bling is a North Sea region European collaboration between European regions. And it stands for blockchain and government, where they want to develop blockchain technology and blockchain applications in government sectors. And the red button is a collaboration between CEB, multiple municipalities, a technology provider, Ledger Leopard, different government organizations. And they started first at what they called the financial emergency brake. It was also called the data vault, and now it is called the red button, and it is intended to provide debt rest, as they call it, to people with debt problems. And when they go into a debt help program, they can signal to their debtors that they are in problems, and that they can that they are working on their debt problems. The empirical material we gathered in the last year contains digital observations during project meetings, and these are a lot of meetings that we were able to attend because of our goddamned COVID pandemic. This led to the fact that at once we started to do digital meetings, and because we had already the contacts with our project partners, of the partners of the Rode Knop, we could attend them. So I was just a fly on the wall, sitting there during digital meetings, and I could really observe how the project changed. That was really a big asset. We also started our interviews with the key actors in the project, and we have public documents and quasi-public public documents that we have. What's interesting here is that there are two values at work in the project. First of all, there is the regie op gegevens, or the idea that you will should be the director of your own data. That is put forward by the fact that this started as a blockchain project. They wanted to develop a self-sovereign identity system where you control what data you share with other actors, in this case, with other debtors. At the same time, there's a very important value of schuldenrust, what they propose, which is giving people in a stressful situation of debt problems the rest to work on their problems. And this was an issue that came out of the practice, so the social practice. And what we see here is that these two values are a bit frictionless, give friction, but they are productive in the same way. And we see that in the process of becoming real, so what happens after the announcement of a good idea, the technology has to be associated to a lot of other actors, like, for instance, municipalities, but also the system for government development called Common Ground, where they add up different innovations. The voice of citizens, but also it's connected to legal requirements, for instance, on schuldhulpverlening, so debt assistance. And all of these issues make the ID more and more real. But it also results in the fact that the technological solution that is offered and promised becomes less and less clear. It is less clear that because of blockchain, all problems will be solved.
Gert,
so
you've run out of time.
Sorry, I know. So just we need to have attention for how this is done and at what place in the process legal compliance is ensured. And we would like to discuss these issues with you in the breakout session on what happens after the announcement, when should compliance be ensured, how should it be done, and how can we look beyond the hype by looking beyond the announcement. So thank you for your attention.